Okay, great. There's our auditory reminder that it is being recorded, and I'm going to work on sharing my screen. Okay, we had a little jump ahead. Okay, so this is a presentation today on financial literacy. So we are looking at a few different aspects. We're going to define it. We're going to review some different categories within financial literacy, and share some resources and information to hopefully guide you through some financial money matters. A little quick tidbit of information. If you are with Scotiabank, I'm sure some of the other banks have indicated it as well, but I had a notification on this. So March, the current month we're in, is Financial Awareness Month. So it's talking about financial literacy, and trying to share a lot of different resources to help folks guide them through aspects of money management. Okay, so here we are, financial literacy. And this is a presentation that is put on by the Brain Injury Association of Waterloo-Wellington. And it is in conjunction with the FSRA, which is the Financial Services Regulatory Authority of Ontario. Some information on this. FSRA is one of the authorities that oversees quite a lot of the institutions within Ontario. Okay, different provinces have different regulatory authorities. So we'll talk a little bit more about the connection and how this plays into financial literacy as we get through some of the slides. But it's nice to see that they've been able to fund projects for the Brain Injury Association. Okay, so we get into the idea of what is financial literacy. So first we have to define it. Okay, so it is the ability to understand and effectively make smart choices with money. Okay, it is looking at budgeting. These are some of the categories. Knowing how to utilize money and how to plan and spend it. The idea of investing, how we can make funds grow over time, and the idea of managing expenses. And there's a variety of ways that managing of expenses can occur. Okay. The idea of the importance. Why is financial literacy important? I think a lot of us, maybe I'm speaking anecdotally, but a lot of us growing up in school, unless we took any business planning or financing in post-secondary, may not have had access to information or education on financial literacy growing up. We might have inherited information from people around us, whether it's parents, guardians, and then as we, would continue on our journey, we'd either pick up information by reading ourselves, but not a lot of information was implemented at some of the lower levels like high school and such. So it's important that we take a look at this and we continue to learn and grow as the nature of finance continues to change and grow in this day and age, right? Okay, so why financial literacy? It's the importance of it, the why. Why do we learn? Why do we want to educate ourselves? Mainly because we want to avoid some poor decision making when it comes to finances. We want to ensure that we have funds to pay for the things we need and plan for the things we want, right? And we want to also ensure that we're getting the most out of what's available to us. There's lots of different grants and bonds and things out there. And if we're aware of it, we could take advantage of it if it's available to us. If we're not aware and we're not If it's not in our line of sight, then we can't take advantage of what's for us, right? So these are some of the things that we would look at. Part of being financially literate, and this is the terminology that's used to take a look at money management, is these 5 pillars. So budgeting, okay, savings, and looking at emergency funds, debt management, and the idea of credit scores. There's a section or a pillar that looks at investing or wealth building, okay? And then looking at fraud prevention and financial decision making. So all of these are generally broken into these categories. However, they interplay quite a bit. Okay, so in this first pillar, the budgeting and money management, there's a few sections that we would look at, right? So there's a number of online banking tools. So when we set up this presentation, we realized that some folks may be comfortable with looking at things that are in the electronic format. So apps, websites, downloadable content that can help manage money, help hold, like a tool to use. And then we also know that some folks are pen and paper. Some folks need to see in front of them, write it down, visualize it that way, and review systems that way. So we've kind of looked at both sides, and there's benefit to both. And there's pros and cons to both, but we've included those here. So some of the things that we look at is the online banking tools. So there's some examples that come up, and I'll show you. But they offer ways to help control spending. Okay, so some of the apps tied to, say, bank accounts, like checking or savings, allow you to set limits on the amount of funds that you would utilize in, say, a day, or sometimes you can set a different frequency. So you may have seen with debit cards these days that you could set a limit of $100, $300, $500, $1,000, or have it open-ended to help control the use or spending of money. Now, for several reasons. One, it could be that if you lose your card, you're not at risk of having someone pick up a card and spending money that's essentially yours. Two, it can help you with really looking at and making informed decisions about buying or spending, right? So if I decide one day that I really want to go shopping and I've set my limit at $50 or $100 and something costs a little bit more, that might be pause enough for me to go, do I need this? Is it in my budget? And should I continue on? So there's those types of things that are available. And there's also tools that allow us to track monthly trends within our use of spending, right? So those are linked to our bank accounts, or you can download other tools that allow you to process the information, and you can break it into categories. I'm just going to look at, so this would be one that you would see on a downloadable app for a bank, okay? So this happens to be Scotia. If you are banking with the other financial institutions, they utilize this as well. I could put them all in here, but I chose to just stick with one for the sake of simplicity. But all the other major institutions have a format similar or comparable in design. You can search. So I find sometimes with technology, it's hard to navigate these tools, but I would suggest spending a little bit of time to walk through any banking apps you may have, whether it's on your phone or whether it's on the computer, and take a look at what they offer. So the best way to do that, instead of trying to figure out where, is do a general search. And I, to create some photos, I indicated, what, like how to create a budget. And it brought me to the information that I needed. So it said, go to the home screen on the app, tap the button advice, select budget. And it allows you in the breakdown to pick categories. So if I wanted to, now I just arbitrarily created things to make a point for the slides here. But it allows you to say how much money you're going to spend in, say, travel, how much money you're going to spend in groceries, how much money you're going to spend in utilities, how much if you have an entertainment section or budget. You can create these. You can look at setting a limit for the amounts that you want to spend, and it'll track your use throughout the month. You have the option of setting alerts. So if you go over, it can notify you, which is a great tool to have, so that your awareness is still there. Okay. So this is just kind of showing you. So I created a fake budget for the purpose of getting a picture. And it shows in this one that I was over a certain spending in an entertainment section, but I was under in the amount of money I put aside for, say, specifically dining. Okay, those are just arbitrary feel like components. You can pick whatever you would make sense for you. Okay. Some folks like the paper copy. I found this particularly helpful when I, at one point when I was looking at what my spending was, and then I would journal entry each month what I spent and take a look at my if I was underspending in a particular category, overspending, and remaining in a budget. I think when Jen and I were looking at this presentation, we noted, and I'm not sure if folks remember this, but there was a TV show. Jen, I don't know if you can help with what it was called.
Yeah, so I might be dating myself a little bit, but it was called it was a woman named Gail Vaz Oxlade. She's Canadian, a financial whiz. She had a few shows, one of which had come to mind was Till Debt Do Us Part. So she would walk couples through how to budget, not only how to budget, but how to do debt management. Yeah, Kelly, hey, I love it too. And work with actual cash and staying away from credit or other loans and things that were landing people in hot water. So she used the journal and the jars or envelope, whichever system. So with the couples, with the individuals that she was working at, she looked at all their finances as a whole, would narrow down, how much to pay on their debt, what they actually were spending on things like entertainment or food out, eating out. And a lot of the times the people were like, in shock as to what they were actually spending per month when they would look at everything as a whole. So overall, I think her technique was just kind of breaking things down. Category by category, divvying everything up, putting it all on paper so you can see everything that's in, that's out. And it was, yeah, very an interesting way to kind of look at your budget as a whole.
And I think it depends on what type of learner we are. If we
Mhm.
need a visual or a tangible component to our budgeting. So, the idea of previous to a lot of the technology development, which has been useful in a lot of ways. But previous to that, we would, we'd get our paycheck or income in some format, either through mail or from work. We'd have to make a trip to the bank and withdraw funds for the week or for till the next paycheck, however that worked. And we'd have that tangible amount in our hands. And there was something to that in the way people learned to budget, because it was a tangible visual reminder of what was had, right? When we moved to debit system, what we saw within the credit community and within some of the financial regulatory authorities is that there was a large issue with debt management, especially with the changeover with folks not understanding or not being mindful of or tracking spending that was automated, right? Put in a card, press a button, money is gone, and then it's out of sight, out of mind. So you really have to think about, when we look at budgeting, what type of learner you are and what system works best for you. Are you someone who needs pen and paper and a visual reminder in front of you of your spending? Are you someone who is okay with the application on your phone, but need to set up alerts so it reminds you and tells you when you're coming to limits? Are you someone who needs to have limits set on specific accounts for spending so you can't go over a certain amount, right? These are all the ways that we support our spending, okay? And helping to stay within a budget. Okay, so again, paper idea. Now, visually, this might be hard to see, but the idea, it doesn't necessarily, you don't really need to see the categories, but the idea is that there's a listed expense item on one side. So some of the categories are rent or mortgage, household maintenance, insurance, the cost of insurance. If someone is paying for utilities, they list it. They look at cell phone, groceries, transportation, fuel. If someone owns a vehicle, whether there's insurance related to that. If someone has a child and requires childcare, they list that. And then it looks at a budget. It says to list your total income and then create a budget based on what you have available to you. Okay. So there's a component of it that some things are in our control and some things aren't. Right. And we have to look at, rent is rent is rent, or mortgage payment is mortgage payment is mortgage payment. There is some flexibility in the sense that someone could negotiate upon renewal a different mortgage outcome, or could look for a slightly different rent, but that's not always doable. But what we can look at is the components that are the wants versus the needs. Okay, so it says place the budget based on the income, record what was actually spent. So this takes into account, this pen and paper method takes into account that you'd have to do a little bit of work in keeping receipts and adding things up. So for folks that don't like that, maybe an app on the phone is easier that's connected to your bank account and it'll do that section for you. And then look at the difference. So you're going to calculate, is it overspending or underspending, so that you can then adjust the next monthly budget, right? So what you're doing is you're learning from your spending habits. And the hope is that over time, doing this on a monthly basis for 3 months, 6 months, a year, you can look to see what your spending habits are, and adjust or make some personal decisions on what would be most effective to be in control of your spending and money, right? Okay, so some of the tips that a number of financial institutions and a number of, the Canadian government has a rule. There's a few other European countries that look at specific rules. This is the one when we were looking at the different ratios for spending. This is one that came up quite a bit. Now, there are ones that have slightly different numbers, and sometimes that's based on different countries and what, say, their housing needs are, right? Someone who's renting in Ontario, in some parts of Ontario, we know that that might be inflated and a lot of income might be going to rent or some of those needs, and the ratios might not work out. But ideally, this is what, when financial advisors are looking at spending and budgeting with funds, this is what the ideal ratio would be. Okay, so 50% of income for on a monthly basis would be going towards needs. So, roof over the head, food on the table, and bills to pay off, utilities, insurance, and the like. 30% would be for wants. Okay, so this, it might be entertainment, it might be different hobbies that someone is doing if they're going to a class, an art class, things like that. Um, if gym, right? Memberships, that. And then 20% is that idea of if you can, saving or paying off debts. And this is important because 20%, if you're looking at if someone has debts, you want to make a plan for covering that. That is outside of your monthly bills that are required for living, right? Okay, so this is what the budgeting, a tip, a tool, a framework, a guideline to look at. Obviously, we're aware that depending on what rent is like, sometimes rent eats up the majority of our income. Sometimes mortgage does. Sometimes other things do. So this is the ideal. You really do have to look at your personal income to be able to make a financial decision for yourself. Okay. And back to the tips with things like banking, if you have cards or apps, another little tool or strategy to help maintain things, especially when we're looking at the idea of, and we've talked about this in previous trainings, the idea of ensuring that we implement the security features for the specific apps, right? So if it is an app on a phone or computer, that you have a password protection, that maybe there's a double feature. If it's a banking app on your phone, or your card, your debit card or credit card, that you have a lock feature, something that you can access, that if you leave your bank card somewhere, you can automatically indicate that the card has been lost. So if someone happens to pick it up and use it, it won't go through. So I have this set up on my phone. I am notorious. I learned the hard way, notorious for leaving my debit card places. And, a couple hours later, 5 hours later, the next day, when I've gone to use my debit card again and realized that it wasn't with me, I've had to, little panic attack, and then had to deal with canceling the card. But now there's a new feature with these applications on your phone, connecting your debit cards and credit cards, that you can toggle off and lock your card for folks using it. So it's a great feature, and I always take a moment to remind folks of that capability or aspect.
You can also set your tap limit. I believe you can opt out of tap as well if you
Mhm.
don't. I think there is a general rule that tap can't be over a certain amount. I don't know what that is, because like Laura said, you leave your card, someone can pick it up, they can tap $10, $100, maybe even two. So within your online banking or at your financial institution, you can either opt out of tap or set your limit to just very low.
I have removed tap because of my my inability to keep my bank card on me at all times. So that was a decision that was made to keep my my bank account safe. remove tap. So take a look at what it would suit yourself in helping to secure some of your needs. Okay, oops, that kind of did a little jump. So we're gonna go back one. But essentially the title page was looking at savings and emergency funds. So when we look at the pillars and we look at financial literacy and we look at budgeting and kind of setting up a system for income coming in, one of the components was savings and emergency funds, because we want to project or look into the future for things that are, might be larger things that we might have to purchase, or planning, saving, as the saying goes, for that rainy day. Now, this is based on what people can do, right? There's a vast difference in income or earnings from individual to individual, right? So sometimes this is difficult for folks, and sometimes this is relatively okay, right? But it is one where it's it's a good idea to plan and then start, thinking about it with a specific goal in mind. If funds are not large, so if income on a monthly basis isn't a significant amount, a small amount would work. And there's different ways you can do this. Again, you can go back to an application where you set up on your phone or bank with your banking institution that a specific amount each month is pulled into a savings account automatically. If you are someone who needs to visually see it, we go back to that old school piggy bank method, if that's what's needed, right? The idea of having a visual reminder where we're pulling money out and putting it somewhere, right? So some people are put in jars. Some people will still have it in a bank account, so not a tactile bill, but they'll put it there, but they'll create a chart or system to monitor, right? And that way it's a way of keeping motivated or staying motivated. There's different types of savings account, and it's worth it to take a look at to see how there's, you can just save money. You can have an account and put money in there, but then there's options to look at as far as what type of growth your savings has, right? Whether what the interest on the savings is, and it's worth it to take a look at the different options out there. Different banks have different percentages. They have different plans if you have a certain amount of funds in the bank account. So when you're looking at this, ask around, and so you can get the most out of your money and out of your savings. If you've put in the effort to save it, maybe take a time and put in some effort to try to grow it, right? Or get the most out of of it being in a bank account somewhere. There are, when we look at why someone would do this, the idea is that we want to have 1, 2, 3. The ideal would be 3 to 6 months of emergency funds, and that's if there's something that happens, accident, injury, loss of an income earner, right? That there's some safety net there. It's not always doable, right? Especially for some folks in certain times of their lives, it's not doable. But it is a good idea to keep this in mind so that if you're in a position that you can, that you make a plan to do so. Okay. Other folks will say, have some, maybe a long-term or short-term goal, saving for a specific vacation, right? Saving for a post-secondary or a diploma or degree, right? That we know that there's a certain amount of money in. Some people will say, I know that in the next 5 years, I'm going to have to replace a vehicle, or I'm going to have to replace the roof, or I'm going to need new windows, whatever the case may be. I'm going to need new assistive devices, right? and I'm going to have to plan for the purchase of those. So I'm going to start putting a small amount away, right? So yes, there's different ways you can do it, and it can be that tactile visual with physically pulling a certain amount of money and putting it somewhere. And then there's the idea of having the bank electronically automate a transfer. Okay. But we do want to keep in mind to plan and look at a goal. When we plan and look at a goal, we are more likely to do it. And then we're more likely to be critical in our budgeting when we review it and kind of take a more mindful look at our spending. Some other things. Now, there's the idea of saving funds that come from income. But then there's also the idea of making use of government contributing components. So, for some folks, it is trying to make application for disability tax credit. Is it an automatic approval? Not necessarily, but the going through it allows you to open up access to something called the Registered Disability Saving Plan, okay, or DSP. There's also tax-free savings accounts, the TFSA. Okay, these are ways that we can put money somewhere, save for a rainy day. In some cases, build interest on these on the funds. In this in the idea of the tax-free savings account, it is literally what it says. You're able to the funds that are put in there, there's a certain amount you can place in it, are not going to be taxed. So folks that are looking at income tax time and what their limits are, this is a way to maybe keep a little bit of extra money in your pocket. And it is worth it to speak to someone or read up on it, right? And what makes most sense for you as far as where you can place your money and make it count, right? For some folks looking at the Registered Disability Savings Plan, this was instituted, it's a federal plan. This was to match the RRSPs, noting that some folks that are that have a disability are unable to save funds in an income-related traditional way. So they've had this, and this is something where you contribute to it, much like an RRSP. There's a you kind of put it in for a certain amount of time, and then after, in this case, 10 years, you're able to pull it out. But there's some bonds that are related to it and some contributions that you can make where the government matches it. And it's a way to save. So it's interesting to look at the list, and this is on the government website or Canadian government website, of the different types of plans, saving plans and investment plans that are out there for folks, and to take a look at what's available to you and fits your particular situation. Another pillar that we look at is the debt management and credit scores. Okay, so some folks get stuck on the how am I going to save? How am I going to manage planning and budgeting when my debt is overwhelming and when I owe a lot? So interest, when my credit's bad, what can I do? And this is a component we see. I've seen a lot of where a lot of people are become overwhelmed, maybe not aware of some of the options that are out there. So I wanted to, at least in this section, allow for some information sharing on different ways one can look at supporting debt management, right? Because let's be honest, it happens, and situations in life change. So folks may need this, right? So some of the tips that are out there to help manage debt we have. So debt can come in the form of interest on a credit card, a loan for an item purchased, The various interest rates differ depending on who the lender is and what the purchase is for, right? So a mortgage payment is different than, say, a car payment is different than, say, someone who purchases a timeshare and it's not loaned through a bank, or a credit card, right? Some credit cards have percentage rates that are extremely high or started low, but with non-payments, it's jacked up, right? So we want to make sure we look at understanding the interest rates and the amount or value of whatever that loan or credit is, and taking a look at paying off the highest interest of debt first. Okay, so you can get down to your principal. Make at least, when they say this, it's not saying make the least payment, minimum payment. It's saying at least make the minimum payment to protect your credit score. Okay, so the emphasis means something very different. If we miss payments or minimum payments, sometimes it like I said, it increases our interest and it becomes a problem where we're paying more than the value of the product in the first place. Okay. If you're someone who is not so great at sticking within a certain amount of spending, it might be useful to limit the amount on a credit card or a loan. So sometimes the companies or the banks are like, hey, you know, congratulations, we've increased your credit limit from 3,000 to 5,000 or 5,000 to 10,000. And you're like, yay, I have more money or access to. And so for some people, that might be a good thing, especially if they're looking at, they might need to make a big purchase of something and they want to ensure that they have that buffer. And for other folks, they're like, no, because I'm going to spend it and I have no way or plan or ability to pay it back. So, it might be something where you take a look at saying, no, thank you. Or in some cases, people have accepted an extended limit. And then as they paid it back, they've asked for the limit to be decreased to help prevent further spending or maybe, out of budget spending. Okay, so that's an option to you, and people, it's good to be aware of. Another thing to do is ensure you're aware of what your credit score is. And just talking with amongst ourselves, Jen and I, we're looking at this, that there's different types of credit checks. So there's ones that are done when you apply for a credit card or a loan, and those typically take a toll or might decrease your credit score by a small amount, and it is something that is standard. But then there's the option, and it's usually tied with your bank card, that allows you to do what is looked at as a soft credit check. It does not affect your credit score, and it's usually within the whatever banking app you have. Okay, and what that does is just keeps an eye on what's happening. A lot of people are not aware of their credit score. They don't have no idea what it even sits on. But it is good to look at because it does monitor trends, habits, and even it looks at payments or payment patterns or missed payment patterns, right? So it's helpful to look at that and ensuring that nothing is happening to your credit that you're unaware of, right? So, ensuring that old loans that you've had are closed off, right? And not open. That's an important one. That, when you've paid off that vehicle that you've requested from the loan department, documentation that says there's no lien on your vehicle or such, right? Very important things to do. And this way, you can continue to monitor and ensure that you're making some sound financial decisions.
It's also
When
good
you,
to check, sorry, Laura, just along the lines of, trends and things in your credit. In the event that somebody has gotten a hold of your information or somebody has gotten a hold of your card, you want to get ahead of any fraudulent purchases or cards that are in your name. If it gets too far down the line, it becomes just more increasingly difficult to have that issue taken care of.
Thank you. Okay. The other idea is when we have the ability to do so, and if you're someone who needs reminders or is not too great at remembering when a bill is due, there's the option of setting up automatic payments, right? So some people line it up with when funds come in. So income funds, whether it be from employment or from assistance, they may line up other bills so that it comes out at the same time so that they know their needs are taken care of and that what's left over goes to the wants, right? So that's a system. Um, if I'm going to speak anecdotally again, I used to line up car payments with my employment income coming in so that it was kind of set out at the same day. So that it was automatic.
Everything goes out. Yeah.
Yeah. So some of the things that with debt management, debt is, it can be very scary. It can be overwhelming, but there's a number of different options for folks if they're struggling with the management of debt they have. And these are the examples that are given. Okay. There are nonprofits in every community that support folks with credit counseling, with looking at debt management, that help uh, interact with creditors to establish a repayment plan. Um, some of the larger ones would be considered a consumer proposal, where they take a look at all amounts owing, whether it's multiple credit cards, multiple loans, and look at talking to the creditors, the banks, putting a hold on further interest charges, and making a plan to just pay off what the loan was. So you don't get that snowball effect of continued debt upon debt, and kind of get a hold of getting your life back. And then there's the option for some folks that it just the consumer proposal won't work, can't consolidate debt for whatever reason, that there's that bankruptcy may be the option. But it's best to speak to someone who functions in supporting folks with this, because they would help manage all the creditors, complete the information, walk you through some credit counseling, some education, and get life on track again, right? So there is options for that. The next section is looking at investment and wealth building. This is, we're not going to speak about how to invest, okay? Because I think, we're going to talk about what is out there and some of the knowledge. You really do need to speak to someone who is an expert in investments. I can't tell you what to invest in. That would be, it would be unethical of me to do so. So we say to talk to trusted financial experts. And, this presentation is put on by FSRA, so the Financial Service Regulatory Authority. They are the folks that actually take a look at the certified financial advisors, financial analysts, and monitor and regulate them, right? So they monitor and regulate what's happening with folks that are giving advice regarding different types of investments. Okay. There's a nifty little tool on the website that you can actually look up different financial experts and advisors and see if there's any disciplinary action on them. So if you're speaking to someone about investments, you can also look up, just much like you can do with a doctor a practitioner in a physician in Ontario, and look up whether there's any disciplinary action on them. You can do this with financial advisors. So, before you trust someone with all your money, you should see if they are under a regulatory body. Okay, so sorry, some of these things to look at. You know, we talked about retirement savings plan or retirement disability savings plan, but there are apps out there that you can take a look at that talks about investment and walks you through some different stages of investing. There's the aspect of mutual funds, there's an aspect of, the banks offer very low type things with like GICs and things like that, small percentages, and then you can build it into different sections based on what you're comfortable with investing, right? Some people are like high risk investors, some people are like, I just want something slow and steady that I know at the end of the day, I can have some funds to rely on. But it's best to talk to someone. And they are usually indicated by someone with certification. So usually it's a certified financial planner, a certified health insurance specialist, a disability finance specialist. Banks will have what they call a financial advisor. But when you're looking at someone, you can give yourself any employment place can pretty much give themselves any title. So you just want to make sure that they're certified and that they're accountable to a regulatory authority. And you can ask them that. What's your schooling? What's your background? Who monitors or regulates you? Because if I'm going to give you my money, I want to know that I can track it down later, track you down later, and hold you accountable for making these decisions for me. Okay, so keep that in mind. The ending part, as we're getting to the end of this talk, is looking at if you're someone who has struggled with budgeting, struggled with maintaining, or paying bills on time, whether it's from memory issues or cognitive executive function needs, planning, understanding. There's a few different things that you can do. Some have very strict rules and guidelines, and some are voluntary. Okay, so I did want to bring attention to a few different aspects of care. These are folks that help with financial planning, help with budgeting, help with paying bills. And it is something called a trusteeship and financial literacy assistance. Okay, they are nonprofits, they operate in each community. They change over time, but the one that is current to this day, and I'm going to see if the link allows me to open it. If it doesn't, it's in here. And I know Lex and that will be able to access it for you. But what it is a program, a voluntary trusteeship is where you go with all your information about what your income is, and you go with your bills, and you set up a plan where they literally have a system where they pay your bills on time for you based on the funds. Okay. It is voluntary, meaning you sign a contract, but you can revoke that and take the responsibility out of their hands. So for some people that are constantly maybe getting in trouble with landlord and tenant board because they're forgetting to make payment on time for rent, or having threats of certain power being shut off, things like that, because they're forgetting to pay. This is an ideal assistance to ensure that the memory piece, the cognitive piece is taken care of, so that you can continue to have a secure place to live or secure access to needs, right? The other idea is, and this system is determined through the courts, is the public office of the guardian and trustee. So this is when we look at substitute decision makers. This is when we look at other folks that are maybe looking at someone managing their medical decision making or financial, and it is signed over through the courts to another person. So some people have their family member, right? or like a power of attorney or a substitute decision maker. And some people don't have a person in their life that can help support decisions and actually relinquish their rights, basically, to an appointed person in the government. Okay, that is like the last case scenario, but I want folks to know that these are the kind of continuum or spectrum of levels of support that go through, or levels of intervention that go through with finances, right? Okay. Karen there at Brain Injury Association has put together a list of different places and names of sites that look at financial literacy assistance or trusteeship, whether it's in a voluntary program or whether it's support with budgeting beyond the association, so folks can access it in their area. So these are the list, and there's the contact and link information to that, Karen, who is at the Brain Injury Association, has. So if you have questions or you want to get, look at the various workshops over the coming months or year, you want to talk to someone who does credit counseling, you want to have someone support you with voluntary bill paying, these are some of the places that can do it. Okay. So it's important in real time what's available in your area. Okay. Because they can sit down with your paperwork and help you work through it, which is half the battle, which is half the work, right? Okay. So we want to make sure that we've hopefully given some information, hopefully made folks think about different aspects that they can utilize or look into for their budgeting, banking, debt support, or repayment plans, and future investing and saving. Obviously, it's a very broad topic, but financial literacy is all about knowing options, knowing what's available, understanding money, understanding where your money goes, and making plans for it. Right? It's that the idea of budgeting, the idea of understanding savings, and the idea of having debt in somewhat of control, right? So this is where we kind of get to, if there is any questions, and I know that there's some things that have popped up in the chat. I was watching them go by, so we'll take a look at that. And we have put up some of the tools, the budget planners, the benefit finders, some of the forms and publications from the government for folks to utilize if they find that helpful. Of course, these are examples. There are many, many different types of budget planners and different apps that you can utilize, but these are some that you can take a look at and walk around the information. Again, if this is overwhelming, it might be an idea to take a component of it and then seek assistance from some of the that list of different agencies, or even the association, to support you.
So Janice was asking if the slides will be shared.
Yeah, so we've recorded it. So hopefully we'll leave that up to the Brain Injury Association of Wellington Waterloo. We're happy to share because it's there for your learning. So that you can take home the information and refer back to it as far as some of the planning and strategies and resource links. So happy to share.
Does anyone have any questions? Can always inquire after if you've gone away and thought about it and need some follow-up. You've got your support of the Brain Injury Association, and by all means, Lex and folks there can always rope Laura, myself, or Kula in as well for any resources or any support.
Absolutely, and thank you both, Jen and Kula, for sharing all of this information. It's so important to get it out there, and if we haven't already, if we can just hit end record.
Yes.
Got it.
Thanks for that reminder.